Hello everybody and welcome to an unofficial patch rundown for the Survivors of the Void DLC for Risk of Rain 2. Now this time around we don't actually have any official patch notes to go off, but I've put like 30 hours into the DLC so far, so I can give you a pretty good understanding of what's going on. First of all, I want to talk about the two new survivors real quick. The Railgunner, you get her automatically just from buying the DLC. You're still gonna have to unlock her abilities and her skin, obviously. The Void Fiend, you can unlock from two different ways. Number one, kill the alternate final boss. I'll put up a thumbnail here of the video I just put out. There's no spoilers in it, don't worry. Or you can get to wave 50 of the Simulacrum, which is the brand new game mode, which you just access by the main menu, click alternate game modes, just like Prismatic Trials. Bada bing, bada boom, get to wave 50, easy. For the items, again, I'm not gonna talk about their relative power or their synergies with other items. I'll save that stuff for the tier list. I'm just gonna tell you exactly what they do. So the Mocha gives you half of a syringe and half of a goat hoof, 7.5% attack speed and 7% movement speed per stack. The Delicate Watch gives you 20% damage, which is multiplicative with other damage like crowbars, focus crystals, landing a crit, etc. All of those are multiplicative. This is no exception. But when you get to low HP, every single stack that you have of this item will break and be completely useless. Think of when you die with the Dio's best friend. You can't print or scrap the consumed Dio's best friend. It's just a useless item. Same idea here. The Roll of Pennies, you simply get gold from taking damage specifically from an enemy. So things like the Void Fields when you're outside of the safe zone, that damage over time will not give you money. I'm not sure if the Hellfire Tincture equipment gives you money because you're not taking damage from an enemy, right? It's your own equipment. The Power Elixir functions like the watches where you get to low HP, it does something. This one heals you for a very large chunk, 75% of your max HP. Also, cool thing to note is that unlike the watches, not every stack is consumed, number one. So if you have 10 stacks, only one is used every time you get to low HP. And two, more importantly, this is prioritized over any watches that you have, meaning when you get to low HP, you will always use an elixir before any of your watches will break. Next up is the Oddly Shaped Opal, which gives you 100 armor per stack while outside of danger. This is exactly the same as the Cautious Slug, where if you're not taking any damage, you're not in danger. Therefore, you get the effect of the item. 100 armor is quite a bit. The Jade Elephant gives you 500 armor for reference, and that is about an 83% damage reduction. I believe 100 armor is somewhere in the low 30s. Correct me if I'm wrong. It might be like upper 20s, lower 30s. Still a pretty hefty amount. For uncommon items, first, the shipping request form. This spawns a multi-shop on every stage that you can use. It is totally free of charge, but there are only two options. However, those options can be different rarities, unlike regular multi-shops, where every item in that multi-shop is the same color. This one, you can have one common, one red. Speaking of reds, every stack of shipping requests that you have simply increases the chance of getting a green or a red item. The Hunter's Harpoon gives you movement speed on killing an enemy. It says 125%, but it fades over 1 second. Realistically, this is like a 50 or 60% move speed buff because that 125 will quickly go down. The Shuriken items, this is one of my favorite. So you get 3 charges of shurikens for the first stack of this item, and each shuriken that you fire does 400% base damage. Now, it deals base damage because it's not actually part of a proc chain, although it has proc coefficient. It can start a proc chain, but as soon as you use an attack, any ability that does damage to an enemy, it will fire a shuriken regardless of if you actually hit the enemy. It's not like an ATG or a ukulele where you have to land the hit on the enemy, then it has a chance to happen. The shuriken will always fire so long as you have a charge of it, regardless of if you hit the enemy or not. Also, the shurikens have a slight bit of homing. So again, if you completely miss, the shuriken still has a chance to, zoom back in there and hit the enemy. Now, the really cool part about this item is this reload over 10 seconds. So for each additional stack of the item that you get 1 additional shuriken. Again, you start with 3, you get 1 additional for every stack. So if you have 2 stacks of this item, you have 4 shurikens in total. However, this 10-second reload does not change. So if you have 2 stacks of the item, you have 4 shurikens, you get 1 shuriken every 2.5 seconds instead of every 3.3 seconds. And this just gets better and better. If you have 10 shurikens in total, you're getting 1 shuriken every single second. The regenerating scrap is exactly what the name suggests. You get a free piece of green scrap on every single stage. Also, all of your stacks are refreshed on the next stage. So if you have 5 stacks of this item, you get 5 screen scrap on the next day. The ignition tank causes your ignites to deal 300% more damage per stack. Also, this works with the Artificer, who has a built-in ignite on both her flamethrower and her primary attack. For legendary items, we have the laser scope, which causes your crits to deal an additional 100% damage. This is an additive bonus, so for every scope you get, you're just getting plus 100%. It's not doubling your crits every time. Also, with the Railgunner, same thing. It's not doubling your crits, it's just adding 100% to that value. The spare drone parts, this one gives you a unique drone called Colonel Drone Man. Causes all your drones to gain attack speed and cooldown reduction 50%. They have a 10% chance to fire a missile, an ATG, and they get a chain gun. Every single one of your drones get those effects. Next up, Ben's Raincoat. This prevents all debuffs on your character and increases your HP by 100. Obviously, 100 HP is one infusion's worth, not a big deal, but preventing debuffs is a very big deal. Bleeds, burns, slows, roots, etc. You're not going to see them on with this item. Also, no, this does not give you permanent uptime on your double bands. That would be extremely busted. It doesn't affect them whatsoever. Next up, the Pocket ICBM. It says all of your missiles fire 2 additional missiles. What this means is all of your missiles have 2 additional sources of missiles. So if you have a disposable missile launcher equipment, for example, you're not just measly shooting out 2 little missiles. You're getting 2 additional streams of missiles. So it's just instead you get. This also works with Engineer, who his harpoons are counted as missiles. So instead of shooting 1 stream of harpoons, you're shooting 3 streams of harpoons. Next, the Symbiotic Scorpion reduces enemy armor by 2 on every single hit. Now, I'm not sure if proc coefficient actually affects this. If it does, it would either affect the amount of armor that you reduce. So if you're playing multi, for example, his nail gun has a 0.6 proc coefficient. So I don't know if that would multiply the 2 armor or the 100% chance. Either way, you are reducing a heck of a lot enemy armor. And yes, enemy armor can go into the negative values, meaning they're taking more and more damage the more you hit them. And last but not least, for the legendaries, the Bottled Chaos simply gives you a random equipment effect every time you activate your equipment. So if you want to do some Gesture of the Drown permanent uptime shenanigans with the Bottled Chaos, you can. Moving on to boss items, we only have one new one, the Defense Nucleus, which drops from the Xi construct, which is the new laser pyramid head thing. This simply gives you an alpha construct, which is one of those little turret things that you see attached to the walls everywhere every time you kill an elite enemy. And you can only have up to 4 at the same time, and you get an additional 4 for every single stat. Moving on to void items, which are the new tier. Essentially, if you don't know, void items are just corrupted versions of regular items that are changed in some way. So starting here with Safer Spaces, these are your tougher times, your teddy bears. Instead of having a chance to block damage, it guarantees that it blocks damage and simply has a cooldown period. Now, this minus 10% per stack is not linear, meaning with 10 teddy bears, you don't have a 100% chance to block everything. That would obviously be super busted. Next, the Needle Tick. These are your tri-tip daggers. 10% chance to collapse enemies for 400% base damage. Collapsing is kind of like Essence of Heresy, the lunar item. Every time you hit an enemy, you get 1 stack of a collapse. And then after a duration, they will all explode at the same time, dealing quite a bit of damage. The Lost Seer's Glasses. These are your Lens Maker's Glasses. Your crit chance gives you a 0.5% chance to instantly kill anything that is not a boss. The Weeping Fungus is your Bustling Fungus. Instead of healing you while you're standing still, it heals you while you are sprinting. The Encrusted Key is the Rusted Key. Instead of a regular lockbox, you get a Void lockbox. And each Void item that you get is separated into rarity. So you have a 60% for a regular, 30% for green, 10% for a red. Speaking of greens, we have a ukulele, the Polylute. Basically, it changes your ukulele from an AoE machine into a single target machine. The Singularity Band is your fire and ice bands. Both of them will convert into this once you have it. And instead of doing their usual effects, it'll do a massive primordial cube area of effect. This is a very big area of effect. It does a little bit of damage, but more importantly, it keeps everything nice and clumped up for you. And then after a duration, it'll explode and deal even more damage. The Lysate Sail, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Instead of giving your equipment additional charge, it gives your special skill an additional charge. However, it doesn't give you any cooldown reduction like fuel cells do. And yes, this does work with Engineer. However, you can only have 3 turrets. That is a hard cap. The Void Sent Flame are the Will of the Wisps, which instead of proccing on kill, they instead proc on anything above 90% HP. So you hit something that's full health, you will get a Will of the Wisp explosion. The Plasma Shrimp, these are your ATGs, gives you a little bit of shield, and while you have shield from any source, so Transcendence, personal shield gens, this item, etc., you will guaranteed fire a missile every single hit that deals 40% damage. The Tentabobble is your Chrono Bobble. Instead of slowing enemies, you root them in place. The Benthic Bloom, this one is just wild. So this is your 57 leaf clover. What it does is it chooses 3 stacks of your items at the start of every stage, and it converts every single item that you have in that stack into another item of the next rarity. So if you have, say, 10 pairs of crit glasses, you go to the next stage, it chooses crit glasses. All 10 of those crit glasses will go into a random green item. And it's not split amongst all the greens. It chooses 1 green. Every single stack will be of that green. So you technically could have like 10 shield gens, and then the next stage, all of a sudden, you have 10 ATGs, 10 Will of the Wisps, 10 Gore's Tomes, etc. And this also upgrades your green items into legendary items. So same idea. If you have like 10 Chrono Bobbles, on the very next stage, you could have 10 Behemoths, 10 Meat Hooks, 10 Resonance Discs, etc. And again, it chooses 3 stacks of your items, not just 1. every single time you go to a new stage. This quickly turns your run into a legendary item only run. And finally, for the last legendary void item, there is the pluripotent larva, which is your Dio's best friend. When you die, it revives you just like normal. However, all of your items that can turn into void items will be turned into void items. So if we have any regular tri-tips, regular crit, regular rusted keys, regular ukuleles, etc., if you have this thing and you die, you will turn them into the void counterparts. No exceptions. Finally, this item here is also a void one. It's actually a boss item. It drops from the new giant crab enemies. I obviously haven't got this yet, so I can't tell you what it does, unfortunately. For lunar items, we start here with the light flux pauldron. This decreases all of your cooldowns by 50%, but also decreases your attack speed. Now, I didn't pay too much attention to this. I would assume that this is multiplicative, meaning that your total amount of attack speed is cut in half. So if you have like 100 syringes, you're not just losing 50% out of that value, because that would be 1500% attack speed. You don't go down to 1450, right? That'd be no difference whatsoever. The stone flux pauldron, same idea. It doubles your max HP, but it also reduces your movement speed by half. The egocentrism, this one is kind of wild, just like the 57th Clover, the corrupted one. Essentially, you have a bunch of bombs that orbit around you, and for every stack of this item, you get more bombs. When they hit an enemy, they explode, and then they recharge over time. Now, the interesting part is that every minute, a random item from your inventory is automatically converted into this item. So the longer your run goes, the more and more egocentrisms, the more and more bombs you have orbiting around you, but you have less control over your loot. Pretty cool concept. Finally, for the last new lunar, Eulogy 0, items that drop have a 5% chance to be a lunar item instead. Now, this is not like when you see a multi-shop, if it has a syringe, if you buy that syringe, there's a 5% chance for it to turn into a lunar. You will actually see the lunar item inside of the multi-shop. Same idea for printers or cauldrons. Every time you print an item, you get that item. It's not going to randomly convert it. But opening chests, which obviously you don't know what's in the chest in the first place, these chests will give you a 5% chance to get a lunar. Moving on to equipment here, we have the Trophy Hunter's Tricorn. This one is very cool. Essentially, you can target any boss enemy that is not Mithrix or the alternate final boss, and this will instantly kill them and give you their boss item. This does not have to be the teleporter boss, meaning if you spawn in on Sky Meadow, you see a grandparent over there, you hit this equipment on him, boom, you just got a Planula for free. However, you only get one charge of this equipment, regardless of how many fuel cells you have. As soon as you use it, it breaks. It actually turns into a little tricorn hat, like the pirate hat, but nonetheless, still a very cool item. Next up is Gubo Jr. This simply spawns a clone of your survivor that lasts 30 seconds and has more damage and more health than you. Gubo will use all of your abilities just like you would in a normal run. However, it probably won't hit everything. Next up here, the Molotov. When you activate this, you'll actually throw out one singular projectile, and then when you hit the enemy, it'll expand into 6, and each of those 6 is just a little puddle of fire. Next up, executive card, better known as mom's credit card. When you spend money, you get 10% of it back. And when you go to a multi-shop, you can choose every single item. None of the options will be locked out or closed to you. And the best part, you don't actually have to use this equipment on anything. Just by holding it in your equipment slot, you get the effects. And finally, the last equipment here, this is currently bugged. It does not drop in games. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it does. Moving on to monsters here. First up are the larvae, which are these big roly-poly looking things. They do a big spinning attack. They jump in the air and then they come down and do a pretty big AoE. They do a lot of damage. Be very, very careful with these things. Void infestors. These guys appear every time you open up one of the new void cradles, which is how you obtain the void items. You will get a random number of these guys. It's anywhere from 1 to 3 every time you open one up. They're very fast and very, very, very small, so they are hard to track sometimes. And when they get near something, they will try and infest it. They'll latch onto it, and then they'll turn it against you. This works for any ally that you have or any enemy that you're facing. So be very careful with things like beetle guards, squid polyps, etc. It will corrupt them and turn them into voids. The blind pest is like a giant lesser wisp. Same idea, just a massive ranged attack that deals quite a bit of damage. Next up, the blind vermin. These guys are just little rats. They're pretty fast and they do quite a bit of damage, so they're very dangerous in large numbers. The alpha construct. This is from the item that I was talking about, the defense construct boss item. This is what you get when you kill an elite enemy. They're just little turrets that sit on the ground and pop up and shoot stuff. The void barnacle. These guys look disgusting. Actually, I haven't looked through the logbook yet. Wow. These are kind of like the alpha constructs. They're just turrets that sit there and shoot at you. Gup is just a big slime. When you kill his first phase, he'll split into 2 more slimes, and then each of those slimes will also split into 2 final slimes. So in total, you're fighting 5 slimes from 1 gup. And for these final ones here, I don't actually know what they are. One of these is the alternate final boss. I'm not going to tell you which one. I also can't really tell. And quickly for the environments, I don't actually have the logs here, but there is a new stage 1, which is Siphoned Forest, a new stage 2, which is the Thalian Sanctuary, and there's a new stage 3 called the Sulfur Pools. And of course, the final boss has its own arena. But other than that, that is all the new stuff, at least all the stuff I can think of that is with the Survivors of the Void DLC. If I missed something important, please leave it in the comments below. Know that things like jumping off a ledge and having extra momentum when you get back, or burn damage being completely busted, those are already being addressed by the developers. Those are not intentional, those are bugs. But other than that, if I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below. You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/Woolie Gaming. Also consider joining our Discord server as well. Thank you for watching and have fun with the DLC.